what? Do an intro for 357. I'm going to introduce you guys. Just pretend I'm a newscaster or some really hokey, phony interviewer, and you're on like we're on the alternative news red carpet, and I'm dressed in a really ill-fitting tuxedo kind of thing.
It's got to be velvet.
Okay. Well, welcome. Hello, ladies, and aren't we lucky? Jody's here.
That's a lovely suit you're wearing, Stephen. I love that velvet. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, it's crushed velvet. I've gotten stepped on a lot in life. And over here we have, this is remarkable. I didn't even think you were going to show up. You rode your bike here. That's very, very energetic of you, considering the heavy shoulders I'm sure that you must have. Welcome, Dr. Judy Wood.
I'm still catching my breath.
Yeah, well, you've been pedaling, I'm sure, for quite a while. You were down at the Motel 6, is the information that was it the Days Inn? Yeah, well, maybe we were mistaken. But anyway, this is so great that you guys are both here. I wanted to let the audience know that we're going to be doing a show, the three of us, called the 357 Show. And it'll only make sense when you listen in. It's going to be a character-driven media. Take it away, Jody. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to go take my makeup off.
All right. Well, while Stephen's taking his makeup off, I will be filling in. I've got Stephen and I've got Dr. Judy in the wings. They're in their various respective places at this point. Stephen is just coming back from his trip to Pittsburgh, and so I'm just waiting for him to come online. And I've also got Dr. Judy, and she had to run a few errands just before the show. You know, we're all human here. And so what I want to do is just start the show to honor those people that actually are here on time. And not that it's not okay to not be here on time. Don't get me wrong. So what I want to do is I'm still being my own technician, and now I'm having to be the host as well. So please bear with me as I do this, and let me know, those of you that are watching, can you just let me know how the sound is and how things are going from your end, just to make sure that everything's copacetic, and we'll get things all tickety-boo before they join us. So if somebody could just type in whether the sound's okay, whether they're seeing what's going on. Because I have a message here that says we're offline, which really seems odd to me. But let me just check. So I'm going to... Okay, so it's disabled. Gosh. Edit and try again. So I'm getting lots of weird messages here. Start your encoder. Well, I've done that, and it says that I'm live, so I'm assuming that it is. Let me just. I'm going to have to refresh my page. So I'm not getting any feedback from people, but it does say live. Actually, there you go. It does say live. So there we go. I just needed to refresh my page. Okay, so then as I said earlier, for those that are just joining us, I'm waiting for Dr. Judy to arrive on Skype, and I think she's actually here. I'm going to give her a call. Here we go. Giving her a call. Let's see if we can hear her. One ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingies, for those that are old enough to know what I'm talking about. Okay, I think I've got her. Is that Dr. Judy?
I hear you.
There we go.
Yep.
Woohoo! So we're all connected, and we're live right now. So I just thought I'd fill for a minute, and wasn't doing a very good job. So I'm glad you're here. So good afternoon. It's late afternoon where you are.
Yeah.
Early afternoon where I am, and it's snowing on the west coast here.
Oh, that'd be that nice. It's kind of hot here.
Well, you know that global warming.
Yeah, we had a early frost. We had a quick climate change.
Yeah, quick
And
climate
then it
change.
rained. Yeah.
Yeah.
and then it went back to being hot again.
Yeah, it's funny about that, isn't it? I'm just going to add Stephen. I
And
think he's
they thought it was catch this. They thought it was so hot the day before yesterday that they thought it would break the long-standing record for that day that was set in 1974. But we didn't break the record.
not 1997. I thought everything changed in 1997. It seems. Now I'm just going to
No,
call
remember in '74 they're worried about it going into an ice
the
age
Ice
right
Age.
after
Yeah,
that.
I remember
Yeah,
that.
and that didn't it didn't get any colder after 1974 on that day, and it hasn't gotten, or I mean, it didn't get warmer. I think
Yeah.
it was 87 was the record. We only made it to 85 that day here, so we
Yeah.
didn't break the. I actually looked at records for where I live, for every day for at least 6 months of the summer months, to see when the hottest day of the year, what when it was set, for that date. And it was like in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and sometimes it was more recent, but the majority of the time it was set long ago. The coldest record was more recent than the hottest record. Isn't that interesting?
That does not surprise me for some reason.
And that'd be a good thing for everybody to do, is to go check the Weather Underground site, whatever, see when on a particular day, let's say September 1st, when was the record for the coldest day? When was the record for the hottest day? What year?
Right.
And then for September 2nd, do the same thing. So September 3rd, do the same thing, and look to see, maybe plot both of them, and it's more recently the cold records have been set for the majority of the time.
That does not surprise me at all. I just want to say hi to Stephen because he's actually here
Oh,
as well. I just noticed him jumping into the fray. Say hi, Stephen.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I just got back from the gallery.
I know,
oh
it's
wow.
amazing that you could be with us. Can you turn your sound up just a wee bit so you can match us? Because we want to hear your dulcet tones.
Okay.
If you can't, that's okay too. Don't worry. We were just talking about the weather from generations ago when we were young, and how because on the West Coast here, I was just saying it's snowing. So of course that's all part of the global warming effect. I've never figured that out.
It's snowing?
Yeah, in its own West Coast kind of way. It's that
Hints
snow
of
that the people
snowflakes.
from the prairies say, "Oh, you guys on the West Coast are such wimps," and then they go out and drive in it and they slide all over the place because it's basically ice.
Slushy.
It's lubricated snow.
It's
Yeah.
a whole different thing than real snow.
Yep,
So,
that's the southern type of snow too. And what I would do, if I was on campus, everybody, we're canceling class for the rest of the day because of snow, and everybody runs to their cars. I would sit there until late at night when I knew all the wreckage was cleared off the road, and then I'd just drive home.
that's
And you see all these cars in the ditches and every which way.
that's a good idea. It's sort of like Good King Wenceslas. You just go on the Feast of Stephen, as it were. You know what I mean? Like you go in the big footprints and then you don't have a problem walking. I think that's
You go. It's already been mashed down for you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like cross country skiing on a track that somebody else has made.
Perfect. That's a great analogy. So, Stephen, you just got back. So we're waiting with bated breath. We're weighing in on you with you. How'd it go?
I like Pittsburgh.
You like Pittsburgh?
I was really, my stepkids drove me down, and I think I'm sort of slow to pick things up. I finally realized, gosh, I think my stepkids really loved me. They were concerned, and so they drove me to Pittsburgh. And then they stayed the night. My daughter cooked a beautiful meal, my stepdaughter. And they went to the Pittsburgh Steelers game, as they say in Pittsburgh, Steelers. So they went to the Steelers game. Yeah, they had a great time. And Pittsburgh's a pretty cultural place. Did you know that, Judy? It's
changed. When I was growing up, it was like real industrial because of all the steel and stuff. But they've had to change that because they don't do so much steel handling anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot of IT stuff now that's moved in, and it's kind of beautiful. I don't know. I was shocked. I didn't expect, and they have a great symphony there. I just wasn't expecting Pittsburgh to be this cultural place.
Everyone thinks it is some sort of, well, it's got a reputation. Let's say that.
Yeah, I thought more likely I'd get punched in the nose or something. Like, you're Canadian, boom.
Right.
Whatever, the Maple Leafs, boom. And it wasn't like that at all. And then I had my art show, and the funny thing is, it was this girl, and she, how sometimes people, it's not that they embellish, but they they get excited, I guess. The gallery's basically your backyard, So I go down there anticipating this gallery, and it's this girl's basically her backyard and her dad's old mechanic workshop. So anyway, they were very nice, her and her mom, and I put up some artwork, and then I screened my film, The Spark. A lot of people spoke and things like that. It was pretty kind of eventful. There were people that showed up that were targeted individuals because some people had raised a bit of money for my travel expenses, and these targeted individuals had helped me out too. So there were some people there from the targeted individual community, and it was really kind of heartfelt because it was kind of the sort of some art people and people that would never be exposed to anything like directed energy weapons, that would have no understanding of what that is, or a woman that shows her shoulder and she's got microwave burns all over it from being hit with microwave directed energy weapons. So, it was kind of interesting to kind of survey the crowd and see their reaction. And I don't think it would have gone over as much 5 or 10 years ago, but I think people are more prepared to hear certain things. And I think that, look, they got a car named after Tesla now. Tesla wasn't even, the average person didn't know who Tesla was 10 or 15.
That's so funny
we
that
were
you should
talking about
mention
in
that.
school.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I just think it's funny that you're mentioning that because Dr. Judy and I were talking about Tesla, or I was talking to her about Tesla. So maybe you could tell Stephen what we were talking about earlier.
Oh, I don't know what we were really talking about. I think you were making some suggestions that I didn't like that topic.
Oh.
I thought Copernicus was a better topic.
Well, there you go. Okay, I'll speak for myself then, and I'll say that I was just looking at a quote that was basically debunking, I suppose, the idea that Einstein was such a great guy. Like his ideas weren't exactly right on, I guess, as far as Tesla was concerned. And so I was really interested in this quote that I heard from Tesla.
Right.
That's it.
Right. There's a lot of people like to debunk Einstein, and they feel it's different than with Tesla doing it, and especially when Tesla did it. But nowadays, people like to debunk Einstein, so that makes them smarter than the myth of Einstein. But it's all about debunking it. It's a fad, it seems, rather than solving new problems. But they say Tesla was maybe solving that one for the first time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if it's been solved, hundreds of times, then it doesn't need to be solved anymore.
Well, Tesla was the one that came up with the ideas for electricity and such. And I think there are people that were
alternating current.
opportunists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he knows what it's like to have been had by the opportunists.
Yes.
No kidding. Did he ever? But it didn't seem to, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it seemed like Tesla was more concerned with just making his inventions. And he must have known he was being Westinghouse, JP Morgan. They were ripping him off, but he just basically shut it out and said, no, I just want to keep inventing,
Yeah, it was sort of like people who were engaged in a sport because of the money versus the love of the sport.
Right. Good point. That's a good analogy. Yeah. Yeah. He just to play the sport.
Yeah. So it was just a passing thought, but it was just something that I was thinking about. So when you were screening the movie, you found that people were kind of, were they confused? What was the response, Stephen?
Yeah, they were, but well, I mean, the movie is about a guy who halfway through the movie, you think, I play the character. I mean, I'm the cheapest actor I know, right?
Good one.
So halfway through the movie, I don't want the audience to know that I'm being hit with voice to skull or directed energy. I don't want the audience to think any of that. The audience should think that, you know, they're not sure if I'm crazy or not, and that's to me that's an honest response, from an outsider. And only in the end does the audience realize that in fact, yeah, this was being done to me. I'm not crazy. I didn't invent it. I'm not.
I don't remember what movie it was, but it had that similar theme, and it was brilliantly done. So you start out thinking the person's crazy, and by the end you realize they're telling the truth.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, but I thought that was excellent because that's how people are viewed until you know what they're talking about, because that's the knee-jerk response that people are brainwashed into doing.
Well, the thing about you two is that you've had your very sort of, they're different experiences, but they're similar in the sense that you guys are totally targeted. Every time you say something, people go, no, okay, I'm exaggerating, not every time, but when people disagree, they really disagree. If they don't understand what's going on, they'll say, oh, you're nuts. And so Dr. Judy.
And that makes them feel power.
Well, sure. Why wouldn't it?
That's an interesting thing. I like that. Yeah, it's like it goes along with the Einstein, people putting down Einstein because it makes them
feel smart.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Because I was actually on the way home, someone gave me a ride because Kim's working today. So I got a ride from someone, and came up, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do now? And I'm saying, well, actually, I'm late. I'm doing this thing we do. It's called 357, and I'm trying to explain it, And Joni, I went to school with, and Dr. Judy Wood's on with us, and we're all,
And then you see their blood pressure go up when they hear my name.
No, he didn't know who you were. So then he's like, well, who's that? I'm like, oh, okay, well, and then I'm explaining who you are. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to put it in palatable terms, and we're talking about the buildings became dustified. Did you notice there wasn't really, if you looked into it, you'd realize there wasn't the huge pile of rubble that it was alluded to, and things
Perfect description.
Yeah, so I'm trying to explain who you are, and I said, and she deals with, it could be directed energy weapons. It appears it's
yeah. Yeah, I don't talk about directed energy weapons.
Okay, well, I do.
But people assume that I do, and then there's this big vast rumor mill that gets going about that.
Well, I just think under the headline of directed energy, it's quite a large umbrella. And it includes any kind of, I don't even want to call it advanced, because if it's with us, it's not advanced. But any kind of technology, for me.
What I call is directed is the energy. It's instructed to do something.
Okay,
but with a gap in there. In other words, it's not a mechanical force doing something to it. It's something more remote.
Okay.
It's being instructed to do something, but it's not like kinetic energy or mechanical energy. It's a no-see-em thing that's at a distance.
And then I described Tesla, and then I went on to describe what's his name, Henderson, the Canadian
Hutchison.
And I said, and that was my last thing with them. So I'm in this car and I'm going, okay, there's a block of steel, there's a piece of wood. You hit it with 3 different forms of currents, and basically it causes it's cause and effect. What happens? You end up with the block of steel with a piece of wood embedded in it. You explain that to me. Anyway, I gotta go. See you later. Yeah. And he's like,
and the wood isn't burned.
Right. Yeah.
That's a really big important thing, because it kind of leads into some of the other things that we've been talking about. But I just want to say that when you're in Pittsburgh, you're in the perfect spot. This was not Pittsburgh, I'm assuming, but when you're in Pittsburgh, those guys they know steel inside and out, so they know it can't be bent into a U shape.
Right.
the building dustifies.
Yeah, without any wrinkles in it, without any kinks or wrinkles in the smooth bend.
Yeah. I think those guys have some, in Pittsburgh, the old people have some experience with blocks of steel as opposed to blocks of aluminum, and which one's stronger, you know?
Yeah,
Or it depends on what the mass is and how thick it is. And
my brother lived just outside of Pittsburgh he lived in Aliquippa, and that's like there's 3 towns, Aliquippa, Ambridge, and Sewickley. And I guess Aliquippa is the real steel town, and when I went there, it was just totally shut down. It was really suffering, but the people there were like 3rd, 4th generation steel workers, and they totally got everything. Anything you want to know about steel, they knew.
So if you throw an egg fast enough, a whole egg, raw egg, if you throw it fast enough, can it go through a steel plate?
Sure, it can. Sure. Yeah.
Guys, be right back.
Okay.
And Wile E. Coyote cartoons. It leaves a silhouette of passage, but not in reality.
That's one of your favorites. I love Wile E. Coyote because it really does remind me of people generally who they really got it right, didn't they? You know, it's like there's Roadrunner who's just kind of standing still, and there's Wile E. Coyote just racking his brain trying to figure out how to get him.
Yeah, and it's always some harebrained idea from Acme, whatever company.
Acme, yeah.
Acme Steel.
It was always Acme.
Acme. Another one of those things we remember from our youth.
Yeah, Acme, that's right.
And I showed the cartoons in class when I was teaching like shear stress, and the students would start giggling, and then you hold it back because they didn't think it was okay to giggle, and they look around and their classmates are starting to giggle, and then suddenly they realize it's okay, and they all burst out laughing.
No doubt, yeah. Well, of course, the joke is really understandable to somebody that's an engineer or who's a student of engineering.
Well, with shear stress, you ever see the cartoon where the coyote turns himself into an arrow, and goes back on a bow and launches himself, and then he ends up sticking through a cactus plant, and his face out the other side, and so there's the circumference of his body stuck in the cactus.
Right.
So I ask him what surface area is holding him back, and they can calculate that, and that's shear stress. And versus normal stress, because usually you just get whatever numbers they don't care if it's partial credit they get. And I said, no, after this you're responsible for getting the right answer.
When they watch cartoons.
What surface? Yeah, so I showed them the cartoon.
Cartoons for them, Dr. Judy. Now they can't just sit there and laugh. They have to be explaining to their friends about the shear stress.
Or the cliff that shears off. The coyote goes out on the edge of the cliff and then it shears off and down he goes. And so you look at the failure surface. And then is it normal stress or is it shear stress? So we did several of those cartoons, and after that they all got it. It was cool.
Okay.
Well, of course, Stephen and I understand that everything you just said. Right?
Well, the difference between shear stress and normal stress. Normal stress is like if your footprint squashes in, or if the rope breaks because you put too much weight on the rope. That's a normal stress versus scissors are called shears. It's a sideways kind of sliding. And so it happens to see the difference. And my favorite one was when he puts bird food on the bridge, and the roadrunner comes out, stops, and eats the bird food. There's the coyote underneath cutting a circular hole out around the bird food. And the bridge falls, but the little disc of pavement stays there.
I think I remember that.
What, you remember it?
Yeah. You just fight all gravity, everything. Yeah.
Right. Wrong side convention for the gravity.
I absolutely loved Well, I love Bugs Bunny as well, but I really believed that we could do stuff like that. My friend Calvin went on a toboggan when we were living in a place with a lot of snow, and Calvin wanted to jump onto the toboggan on his head like Yogi Bear at the beginning of the Huckleberry Hound show.
Yeah.
He thought that he could do that. He'd like jump on the toboggan
Uh-oh.
as we're coming down. And we were totally convinced Calvin could do that. And my friend Vivian and I were on the toboggan.
Uh-oh.
And we just went full throttle down this hill. And he came to school the next day with 2 broken legs.
Oh dear.
Not funny, but it's.
And then everybody else learned from it too.
Well, I don't know. Did we? All I was concerned about was his mom came whipping over when this thing happened. She wanted to take him on my toboggan, and I thought, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't have my toboggan. That's how self-centered we are as kids.
Oh, gee.
No, I felt for the guy.
Yeah, and another thing about the Wile E. Coyote cartoons, you can still run on air as long as you don't look down and notice that there's no ground under you.
Exactly.
It's only when you see there's no ground under you does gravity kick in.
Right. Well, yeah, I know, because he'd be chasing them, and he'd be almost catching them, and then Wile E. Coyote would look down and go, oh, yeah, I remember.
And down he goes.
Yeah, see, you and I had probably totally opposite views of life because I thought that was all possible, and you were probably all skeptical. And then there's Stephen, who's like, maybe Hollywood could do this as a special effect.
No, most people know it's not, and how it's how you know that is why do people laugh at the cartoons?
Well, there you go.
Because they know it's impossible.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't laughing.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, that's so cool. The guy can do that.
I used to hate it when he dropped the great big weight thing. He'd wait for him to come around.
Oh, the anvil. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always thought, oh, that's violent. Jeez, imagine getting hit.
Okay, here we have to do a 9/11 parallel. I have an actual recording from WBAI right when the thing happened that morning, and somebody came to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. They're going to be reporting on the ground for the show, and they come up and they're saying, and there's a airplane-shaped hole. Excuse me, airplane-shaped hole. I mean, the guy cracked up while he was saying it. And I love that recording because that is a normal response to something that is impossible.
Right. Got it.
Did his subconscious knew? It says, and there's an airplane-shaped hole. The guy was breaking up laughing. And then the guys in the studio were watching on TV. There's an airplane-shaped hole, and then they quickly learned how to get control after that.
Oh, that's true.
That's a big tell, and people laugh because something's impossible.
Until you see the serious newscasters reporting on it, and then people go, "Oh, this isn't funny. I guess this happened. This is serious," because they're saying.
And right after that, I put on my website. Well, not long after I put on my website this cartoon of Wile E. Coyote holding up this Acme steel plate, and the Roadrunner comes whoosh through, and who was that? And he looks, and he sees the silhouette of passage of a Roadrunner. Goes, must have been a Roadrunner. And that was the idea with the buildings. You see a silhouette of passage of an airplane. Must have been an airplane.
No.
But airplanes don't make airplane-shaped holes in buildings.
Well, I know it's not your thing, but it's the same thing. I know it's not something you worked on, but I know it's the same thing with the Pentagon, that ridiculous hole. And it's no air, what? And the most surveilled.
I did work on it. There's just not as much hard to have evidence, but there's things like, the windows adjacent to that hole were not broken.
Yeah, right. And no video footage. Isn't that amazing? The most surveilled building in the world, and no video.
I also recorded live. Myself recorded the from my rabbit ears. Bryant Gumbel in New York said, "Oh, these are the first images we're getting of the Pentagon," and then he flashed them up on the screen, and then he says, "Oh, this must be near the Pentagon, not the Pentagon." Because there's no damage to the building.
Just
Oh my God. Is that
And
like
then he was showing the Pentagon, and he was saying, "Well, this must be a building near the Pentagon because he didn't see any damage to it."
oh, that's like Building 7 with the BBC newscaster and it fell behind her.
Right. Well, that was more understandable. That one is
What?
completely understandable. That was nobody was doing, well, hardly anyone was doing their own reporting. They're just hearing rumors. Everybody wanted to be the first to report it, and so they're reporting rumors. And they also reported, and I have a screen clip of that. Been confirmed that One Liberty Plaza has collapsed, and One Liberty Plaza is still standing to this day.
Oh, okay.
And that's the one right across the street from Building 4. It's just that people weren't verifying anything. They're just running with it as fast as they could. But what Brian Gumbel said, that was his own observation, not hearsay.
Okay.
Because he flashed up on the screen the Pentagon, and he said, "Oh, this must be near the Pentagon." But Bill Plant
to
was.
say that isn't true. That BBC didn't have the inside scoop. It just means that there's a question about it.
Well, more than that is you start thinking about why would the BBC have the inside scoop, and what would be the purpose of airing it before, early?
Well, maybe they made a mistake, human error. Just like.
But why would they have the information? It's
How did they have the
they
information about JFK? Apparently, in the documents that have just come out, somebody in England actually
right,
said,
right,
wait for the
but
call.
what is the function of Building 7 is just there's no motivation for that. It's just that everyone was expecting it to go. Is it going to go now? And somebody wanted to be the first to announce it. And then it was actually CNN who made the first statement. And it was BBC copied CNN. And CNN was also the one that said that One Liberty Plaza collapsed. And it was, it's just like everybody wanted to be the first. And so everyone was just jumping over each other. And somebody else said the Empire State Building was hit.
Well, how
Yeah,
did 7? I mean, why would from a logical point of view, evidence-based, why would Building 7 fall because the other two buildings fell?
on what logical basis would the other two buildings, quote, fall?
Yeah, but
It's the same.
sorry, from the point of view
Oh.
of sorry, go ahead.
The official story is that fires and stuff, but that's the official stories for Tower 1 and 2. The stories are just as bogus. That isn't going to come down from fire. Fire doesn't act instantaneously, and it doesn't turn building into powder in midair.
No kidding. Exactly. That's something
And
else.
so if you look at the evidence, none of it makes sense. And how about Building 6? What would make this big hole in the middle? Or what about Building 3? A building falling on it isn't going to make the building disappear. Or building 4, the north wing is left, but the rest is just gone missing. It's not in the ground because I've got photos under the ground of workers walking around. It's just gone. It just went AWOL.
Yes.
But people repeat stuff, and then they make it. It's a distraction that makes it seem important. And if you wanted to cover up the events of 9/11, what's the best way to cover it up? You keep people from looking at the evidence, and you have them assume the evidence by arguing about a theory.
Semantics, yeah.
And it's like a magic trick. You get people to focus on a theory or something else so they don't look at the evidence. You can't figure out what happened unless you look at the evidence. So it's the greatest cover-up. And so, I was actually going to write a article after I did my the Towers one, which ended up turning into a huge, I ended up just unfolding everything. But it was going to be Building 7 and the Easter egg hunt. That was the title of it. Because Building 7 was getting everybody to gawk over it and say, "Oh, this is the key. We got to do." They just had rumors about it. The same thing happened to Building 7 as it happened to Towers 1 and 2.
Right, except that the narrative was that there were planes that were hitting, and it was all live, and who could have not thought this was happening? Whereas Building 7 was later in the day, so it wasn't expected in the same way.
Right, but it went the same way as Tower 2 above where the plane-shaped hole was in the building. Above there was just the same as Building 7. The top part dustified before the rest of it went away.
Right.
And so Building 7 was just like sitting on, it was like that top set of 35 floors or so. But you get people distracted, and they forget to look at the evidence. And the biggest piece of evidence for Building 7 is the whisper quiet demise of the building. There's Barbara Crowley, who's the emergency worker, stand there getting interviewed with the building right behind her dropping away, and people go, oh, and she's like, what happened? What, she didn't know what the problem is, and they have to tell her.
Because you didn't hear any boom, 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 boom.
No, didn't feel anything, didn't hear anything. And there were several videos of that interviewing people on the street, and the building just drops behind them, and they have no clue.
Wow.
Unless they actually saw it. And it made a 0.6 equivalency on the Richter scale. That's only calculated from surface waves. That's like a jackhammer.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was 6 times the potential energy of the Seattle Kingdom, which made a 2.3 on the Richter scale.
Wow. That's
So
good.
you look at that and you say, okay, it can't be bombs in the building. Because if you blow the building apart, it's got to go down. And also, you look at the post office across the street from it. There's no pock marks from like machine gun fire. And if you had bombs going off, and also for controlled demolition, you need to prepare a building. Like take out all the windows, take out everything that's nailed down and not nailed down, and so forth. And if you have window glass in the windows, it's going to go fly and decapitate people. A soda pop bottle on a windowsill is going to fly out and become a missile. None of that happened. So
Yeah.
it's.
Sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, no, I wanted to, finish your thought, Dr. Judy Wood.
Well, there's just that if you look at the evidence does not support controlled demolition. Unless you say, well, this was a demolishing of the building and it was in a controlled fashion, but it's not like bombs in the building type of thing at all. And it's amazing how quiet it was. And there's just weird things happen. People didn't even realize that the building went away.
What does Fetzer say about all this?
Oh, Fetzer, whatever he needs to do to stir the pot. When I first brought up about Building 7 went away the same way that Towers 1 and 2 did, and Fetzer got really animated about that.
Oh, did he?
He needed to keep the bombs in the building story alive.
Yeah.
Because his job is to stir the pot.
See, even in Pittsburgh, though, just so you know, even in Pittsburgh, I'm explaining to people about the work, what you've done in terms of gathering evidence, and we had they interviewed me for this other show. These people that have a video channel showed up and interviewed me, and I put up the Man on the Moon. That her mother had the original LP of the sound of Houston, that whole thing.
And then he kind of he bubbles over one word, or this you don't hear his microphone.
Yeah.
One small lily, and then one cell, one big step for whatever.
That's it. So I have the album in front of my face, and then I pull the album down, and I've got duct tape on my mouth, and then I take off the duct tape, and because these guys are interviewing me, and they're exposing child abuse across America, and they're going to all these
dear.
And they're just they're exposing this stuff, and it's really coming out heavyweight these days, right? And something it is ritual abuse is coming out. Well, I pulled that cover down to sort of accentuate, that I was raised in our generation. I'm a little kid, moon landing, and Joni and Dr. Judy Wood, and we talk, and we did this interview, and that it's for our generation. It's one of the hardest things to let go of is your belief system that this happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our generation is committed to believing it, and the generation above us, it's the last thing to go in some ways, right?
Right.
And I guess it must be the same for some kids that were kids during 9/11. I mean, these sort of like massive, I call them huge traumas because it traumatizes a nation, right? And the same thing goes with JFK. Well, wouldn't you know it, a couple of days ago or a week ago, I contacted by Sean Stone. And so I do this phone conversation with him before the interview with Sean.
Sorry.
Sean Stone, Oliver Stone. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is right on. This is like the day after, 2 days after that the document's going to be released on JFK. Well, what did his dad do a film about? JFK.
With Fetzer.
So I thought, well, like the timing, the synchronicity of all this, and because I talked to you guys 2 weeks ago, it's really been on my mind lately. I find it like, from a psychological point of view, I find it really, 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 really interesting when we're dealing with, masses of the population and group think, and also group
Exactly.
and how that when you smash group belief, of people, how resistant, not resilient, that's different, but how resistant they are and how unwilling
Facts.
they are to look at new evidence or look at the proof, in the pudding kind of thing, like how they'll hang on to that belief, and it's the last thing to go, and so they're so unwilling to let it go. And so it was a great analogy doing the moon landing thing, and then bringing up with Sean Stone about his dad and JFK, and like we're living in amazing times, and these beliefs.
The thing is, Sean Stone knows about 9/11, about my work, but he also knows about the truther work. And if you want your show to do well, you have to go with the popular story, and that's another problem.
It's the popular story. Veterans today, architects and engineers. Is that the popular story?
Yeah, and architects and engineers consists of one opinion, or one story. That's Richard Gage's story, and if you don't go with his story, you're kicked out.
Yeah.
But people believe it's all these engineers and architects got together and scratched their heads and did this investigation, but they're calling for a new investigation. That's an admission of their own incompetence.
Yeah.
That's the catch-22 there, because and people don't realize that. That's the frustrating thing to me when I'm talking to people about investigations. They'll say, that's what we need. We need to solve all this stuff. And I'll say, are you aware that there's been an investigation? Are you aware that there's evidence of what happened to the buildings themselves, so that you can start there? Because again, it's this thing of if people can't deal with it, they have to go to the ad hominem, and they have to start saying how crazy you are, how dumb you are, whatever. And I'm sure
Right.
Stephen's had that experience, and you've had that over this.
It's opinion for hire.
Yeah, and now we've got the California fires, and we've got all these things that are, instead of people looking into it and saying, okay, well, there's a couple of different lines of thought here or ways of looking at it, they're going, oh, well, Dr. Judy Wood's a shill. Now, I watched one of the videos that you.
Yeah, they wouldn't listen to the facts. Yeah, that is an interesting new phenomenon. Is they want to, just like the laser beams from outer space. Oh, Judy Wood says laser beams from outer space, and they decide that that's a good thing to promote. And then if I say, no, I didn't say that, then they say, oh, you're acting like a shill now. About the World Trade Center.
What you said is that, and it's the way that they say it. Oh, because they've got it out there. You never did say it in the first place, but because it's out there, and then you refute it.
Right.
They say, oh, it's you that's gone back on
right.
what you said, instead of
just like
was said in the first place.
The video that Jones would show about orange stuff pouring out of the corner of Tower 2. And that's the first thing I confront, and the only thing I really confront him about. And I said, well, you can't tell what it is from the color. You can't even tell that if it's hot. Because some things are luminescent and glow. And he had to shut me down on that. And he kept saying, oh, Judy Wood argues that it's aluminum, not iron. And no, I didn't. I never said that. I just said that just saying from the color, you cannot determine what the material is. And now there's a guy who's promoting my work who's saying, well, she originally thought it was aluminum pouring out of the building. No, that's totally in contradiction to what I was about.
Wow.
You can't tell what a material is from a distance because of the color it's glowing. It's you don't know.
See, that's another this thing that Joni touched on. I just want to go back to that just for a sec.
Yeah.
The aluminum response that you've had for what? It's been how many years? About almost 9 years, 8 years?
16. Oh, no, since the book was published. Sorry.
but even before the book was published, I mean, I filed a federal key temp case in 2007,
Yeah, 10
and I
years.
was, yeah, at least, and I was talking about before then, but in order to to study it, in order to file the key temp case. But anyway, yeah, it's been, and I've been laughed at and ridiculed for saying the building's mostly turned to dust. And that kept people from recognizing the building mostly turned to dust
But the
for 10
vision,
years.
here's the thing that some people are becoming aware of, though, and this has been said to me personally, and also, in terms of your situation, the same thing. When there's all these ad hominem responses and all this mean-spirited name calling, well, now people are starting to see that, and they're going, wait, this is really a good indication of someone that's probably telling the truth, and now they're having
They have to stomp out that brush fire as fast as they can.
So don't be surprised within the next 6 months, if the world's still around, I think it will be, but that people don't, more and more people are becoming aware that when someone attacked for presents an opinion, I suppose, but it's really fact-based or evidence-based. I bet you
they don't talk about the evidence. Yeah, they got to distract away from the evidence, and that's the central thing. Like Fetzer starts fights to distract people with evidence, and you name calling to distract people away from the evidence. Everything is about distracting people away from the evidence because you cannot solve a problem if you don't know what happened.
Now, why is he this guy? Because he'll also reveal other stuff that seems like it's cutting edge, and he's sticking himself right out there. And it's like he's probably giving you 80-90% truth on a lot of stuff, and then the 10% garbage thrown in. Is that
even less than that? He gets to get out front of everything, so he can. You can't drive a train from the middle. If you want to drive the train over the edge of the cliff, you have to first take over the driver's seat, and then you can derail it. and so you can't do it on evidence, so you have to hijack it.
Right.
And
what the evidence is,
and Fetzer has done that since the JFK questioners started in. He was in charge of that. His job has been to derail everything, and it's very effective. He's the best op out there.
Wow. I heard a guy the other day, I can't remember his name, but I wrote it on my hand. I thought, that's fantastic. I don't want to forget that, because it really, for me, summarizes a lot of what we're kind of talking about in terms of the spin on anything that's coming out.
Well, think about that. What he did with the Sandy Hook thing. He immediately got on that and got, never presenting any evidence, saying, well, it looks like this, and I've heard this, and he just presents a lot of nonsense that can be disproven or has been disproved. But he keeps the pot stirred, and so what it does is anybody associated with that gets drawn down into the gutter with him, and gets their credibility destroyed.
Here's what that stuff is referred to, according to this guy. It's called data on any given tragedy, any of these events, false flags, whatever you want to call them, these things that happen, okay? I guess geoengineering, whatever it is. It's something called data flooding. So what they do is they flood so many ideas at people that the average person is sitting on a computer, and their initial response is basically like watching the towers fall, and say, their initial response may be something like, well, gee, that doesn't make much sense. And then what happens is they get flooded with so much, contradictory information.
They throw their hands up and walk away.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess like what Stephen Molyneux says, Molyneux or that. Yeah, or Stefan, that he says about 9/11, I guess we'll never know what happened. And he doesn't want to look into what happened because, we'll never know. I mean, that's what, the one video I saw of his at the end. And he was talking with a truther, and so, yeah, no wonder why he'd come up with that at the end, rather than you have to look at the evidence. Instead, the whole time they spent talking about stories. This rumor, this story, it just like the BBC thing. Where's the evidence? That's a story. Just like Larry Silverstein, that became a focus. It's just and something like Bush's cousin, head of security, and then put options, stand down orders, all this stuff that has nothing to do with what happened.
Right, just this. Spin and data flooding.
Yep. And spin people around. Pretty soon they leave it up to somebody else and say, yeah, that person's nice. Nobody's picking on them, so they must be telling the right story. And that's what Gage has surrounded himself with. See, I don't go after Gage. I don't want to waste my time doing that. I don't say, well, he believes in that fairy dust from outer space was sprinkled on the buildings and turned them, made him go away. I don't play that game. And the only people that play that game are the dishonest people. But that seems to, be what wins. Like, and Stephen Jones is out of the scene.
Is he good?
He had to, because if somebody asked him questions about my book, he wouldn't be able to answer. So Gage can say, well, I'm not a scientist. And so he doesn't have to be responsible for anything he says.
Good point. Yeah, he's an engineer,
and actually, oh no, he's not an engineer. He's not an engineer. He's an architect, which means he can chop up land and turn into strip malls.
Right.
That's all they do. They do subdivisions or something, or decide where the bathroom goes, or that's not a structural engineer.
So he's out of the game now. They've shoved him out of the way.
Stephen Jones. Yeah, I was talking about the Richard Gage, and see, he's not a scientist, so that he doesn't have to. He just developed strip malls, or whatever he used to. He hasn't done anything for 10 years.
Well, wasn't Stephen Jones NSA?
Probably.
He's whatever.
He's in physics. He was in physics, a physics professor at Brigham Young, and then he decided to retire, take early retirement, and has still got his hand into free energy and cold fusion research.
Well, yeah,
something he named. He brought up that name. Cold fusion. He's the one that named it that, and it wasn't fusion. It was low energy nuclear reactions. But by his calling it, cold fusion. I'm trying to wipe that name out of my mind. That's what discredited it. It's just like calling my work space beams.
Right.
And it's been very effective.
Which you've never said.
Andrew said a lot. I think it's in my book about that Jones coined that term, cold fusion. And actually, at my presentation at the BEM conference, towards the end, I played the clip of Stephen Jones bragging that he and a buddy, Paul Palmer, coined that term, cold fusion.
And that really,
and they're bragging. And also there was, and I have a recording of Fleischman saying, somebody said, "Do you have any regrets?" Well, I regret allowing my competitor to call it cold fusion.
Competitor.
Yeah.
Those kind of terms. I guess that going back to the Einstein thing, just as a really quick, comparison. I think that's the issue that I have with Tesla, Einstein, Westinghouse, all these different people, because Tesla was the guy who was just saying, wouldn't it be great if we had free energy? I mean, that was really his only reason, and the curiosity was what kept him going. He wanted to see. He was a what-ifer, as I call him. What if we did this? And
but he knew that it would be go into the wrong hands. Be used for evil purposes, and so he had to keep it under wraps. And as I say,
other people can come up with. I'm just making the comparison. Because
what other people do is what other people do is sell it to the military, and they make lots of money to keep their mouth shut.
Just like uranium-1. I mean, it's exactly the same stuff that's happening right now. And these things just get recycled, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter whether it's Jones or Tesla or Hillary Clinton or whoever it is. people.
Right, it's how they keep it under wraps, and nowadays, truth doesn't and honesty don't have any value, and so it's how much you can sell your information for is all, and then it becomes of monetary value.
Well, I want you, Dr. Judy, to describe the palatial mansion and the beautiful fleet of vehicles and bicycles worth millions of dollars. The amount of money that you've racked up from your book and that just how much you've financially been rewarded the last 10 years. I mean, it's quite amazing.
Well, I might actually have to sell my house in order to pay for health insurance next year.
Exactly, and that
Yeah,
for me,
it's 3 times my mortgage. Just the monthly premium. It's 3 times my mortgage.
That is insane. That is
well,
completely
that's the last
insane.
step. If someone, I say, if someone's making a whole bunch of money from speaking the truth, I don't really know if I'm going to trust that. However, if someone's broke, almost destitute, on the last wheels, and they're still plugging away. They haven't.
Look at you look at Fetzer, and he out of his own pocket flies, or what appears to be out of his own pocket, flies around to Europe and wherever else, doing what he does. Puts on conferences, and he's like independently wealthy. It appears.
Yeah, sure.
Well, somebody's footing the bill, and that's the interesting thing. It's seeing that it isn't just those people making the money on their own, because that's called entrepreneurial spirit. You actually do something and you get rewarded for that thing. I have absolutely no problem with that. But when you see politicians or people that are on a civil servant salary, regardless of how big that is, I don't care if you're making $500,000 a year. If you see somebody actually breaking in millions, that is not from the stock market. That is somebody.
Right. There's something going on.
There's something going on.
Or like Richard Gage's group, they wanted to buy a big screen, whatever projection screen to drive around Times Square with, and they needed $650,000, and they raised it in one evening.
Wow.
And just donations. They call it donations, but if you look at their donation meter on their site, it's not. You get $1 here, $1 there. That's about it. But it's a good a backstory or whatever, or
cover.
Let's see, what do you call it? Alibi, kind of.
Yeah.
That make people think that it's coming from people's donations. But it comes in like instantly. And also another thing about having donation buttons on a website, if people are donating, they're invested in your stuff. So if they're less likely to look elsewhere for the truth.
That is a really good point too. So you've got these people that are doing the Patreon thing even. They would be very much less likely to take in something that is in opposition. Like we were talking about Stefan Molyneux, and I really respect the guy, but I would suggest that probably his listeners are not going to entertain an opposing point of view or a contrary point of view.
Exactly.
Yeah. And people like him have a lot of sway. and for good reason. I mean, the guy is stock and logic most of the time.
No, he's a bright guy.
As people jump on board, but they don't want to admit that they were taken in and made a fool of.
Because they're not thinking for themselves. This is my whole issue, is that they jump on board. And I don't care whether it's a religious leader, it doesn't matter. People generally will jump on board of a belief system based on what
and based on if somebody's charismatic or not. Of course, think of the Jim Jones character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They'll hang on to though. That's really, from a psychological point of view, that's what I'm fascinated about, is that people have been speaking the truth about any number of subjects. For example, the targeted individual stuff, and there's no benefit telling the truth. I mean, your life is in a shambles. You don't benefit. You're not getting rewarded, and you're called crazy and insane and schizophrenic and all these things, right?
And the people who are calling you that are benefiting from calling you that.
Yeah, or they're being paid to benefit. Yeah, they're shills that are being paid, whoever they are. But it's amazing. It's like, wow. I mean, how hard is it for someone to change their mind? It's obviously pretty hard. and people want to go with the popular opinion most of the time. And that, again, is what's gone on with architects and engineers. It's like, well, that's the popular counter
Or they're
opinion.
told is popular. When the group formed, the first rule of their group was anybody who's had anything to do with somebody by the name of Judy Woods is banned from the group. And that
Wow.
was rule number one.
Wow.
Even my lawyer tried to sign up and couldn't.
Wow.
Where is that? Do you have that actual document? I'd be really curious to see.
Oh, there's a document in their vetting manual how to vet for new members, and they're supposed to do cross searches with this person's name on the internet with anything to do with Zionism, Holocaust denying, or Judy Wood. They might have named something else. I'm the only person named. They're supposed to see if anybody's had anything to do with the name Judy Wood, and then they're banned from the group. That's current.
Wow. And I'm just curious about where I can.
That page. If you, I think it might be linkable from Andrew's website. Check the evidence.
Okay, fine. So
and there's an article about Richard Gage being a liar, and there's Liars for 9/11 Truth or something, and there's documents in there like Richard Gage was talking with Dane Wigington, and got Dane Wigington to help him out and bash me, and Gage says, oh, her book is about this, that, and the other. She totally denies this, totally denies that, and you can look at the table of contents and see that I don't, and that page is the table of contents is also on that web page, as well as a check written by Richard Gage buying the book. so it shows he bought my book, and then here's the table of contents. Yet he's denying he's claiming within the book isn't.
That's absolutely nuts. That's crazy.
And that's and then on Dane Wigington's show, they've made some statements to the effect of, we have this one person standing in our way of getting the truth forward. Just one person named Judy Wood. Almost like they're inviting some kook out there to take me out.
Wow. Hey, how's Andrew Johnson doing? Is he good?
Yeah, he's great.
No,
he's a wonderful human being.
I think so too. I enjoyed talking to him that one time. I'm also wondering about Richie Allen. Have you spoken to Richie Allen?
Oh, he goes wherever the wind blows.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Andrew had talked with him or one of those characters about my work, and they were on board. And then they started talking with me, and then they were bringing up thermite and saying, "Well, your theory is all right, but thermite has been proved," and just trashing me.
Wow! And how?
To my face. And Andrew even drove down someplace and handed a copy of my book to this character. That's what the problem is. It's not about facts. It's about popularity.
Yeah.
And that's how our media runs. Whether it's you call it alternative media or mainstream media or whatever, it's about popularity.
Right. I'm pretty savvy in that most alternative media has been compromised, especially the popular ones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, after somebody decides that my work is right on target, I mean, how can it not be? I only present evidence. There's no theory or speculation. And the reason why my book is written the way it is because I don't want people to take my word for it. I want them to understand for themselves, independent of me. And so that's why they have to walk through the evidence. I just present it easily for them to walk through the evidence bit by bit, and they can form whatever conclusion they want to form. But it's all about facts. I ask, why is this that way? Or why is that sitting over there? Why doesn't that dome across the street from Tower 1 have any dents in the roof? Things like that. And it gets people to stop and think, and to think for the answer. Oh, let's see.
Oh, by the way, while you're doing that, I just thought I would let you know that I did find that document that I was asking about. For anybody that's listening, you can go to check the evidence. And where did I get it? So this is from Architects and Engineers, and it says refined searches, if not already found through items A and B, which they mentioned above, refined Google searches to determine any correlation to questionable ideologies using combinations of username and search term, as well as full name and search term. Among the search terms to be considered are, quote, no planes, quote, DEW, quote, nukes, quote, HARP, UFO, Judy Wood, Jews, Holocaust, Zionism. Isn't that bizarre? Like, out of all of they've got, all these isms and all these, technologies, and Judy Wood.
Wow. Wow.
That is on their actual site. So what are they trying to cover there? What are they trying to kind of cover up?
I know. Believe me, I know.
Well, you would know, Stephen, because that's what I love about the just the relationship that you have with Dr. Judy is interesting because you're in a totally different world, but you've experienced the same effects.
Well, the psychological stuff, yeah, and it's absolutely, well, it's kind of fascinating if it wasn't so tragic. I mean, the way you get beat up, and I don't get cards following me anymore. I'm just blacklisted and kind of financially ruined, but yeah, what I went through, and then I asked people, but I was a movie actor. I mean, why would I make it? Because their argument is that I wanted attention. That's why I made up this cockamamie story. Yeah. I'm like, well, what kind of attention would I want? I'm telling you something that's so outrageous that I didn't even believe it was possible, and I was living it. So what would be the advantage of making up some story about getting gang stalked and my safety boxes being broken into or evaporating and my children being threatened and stolen, and where's the advantage for me, and
just try your next vision is trying to get attention, clearly.
Right.
I mean,
you're insecure and need the approval of others.
Yeah, right.
I've actually heard that before, and I like, how do you get the approval of others when you do that?
Good point. Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Beaten up by their own. Were you here when I was reading that thing from?
No, I just joined it. What did you see on check the evidence?
I was just checking the evidence while you were on, and I did find the vetting guidelines, as they call it, and it's check the evidence, and you can just go in there and just put in Richard Gage in the search. Actually, what did I do? I just put architects, and it came up, and there's a whole
and you're good.
Various things. But the one that I just read on air was referring to you. So they've got, do weapons and all the stuff that you search for and know that this is debunkable.
Bad.
And then Judy Wood.
Yep. And that no other name. And what does that do? If you're supposed to vet people for that, it's like, don't ever go there.
Right.
Yeah. And yet they're saying that you can get a lot of your information on the internet. Sometimes you can get it in person, but most of the information you can get on the internet. Because the internet never leaves.
Right. But it's strange. Like, why would you have a vetting manual that tells people what to think and what not to think?
Wow. Exactly.
Yeah.
Dinosaur.
And is that scientific?
I love that. See, that's the kind of thing I could spend a whole hour just talking to people about. That particular thing is like this kind of evidence, this kind of document, and then going through it and then getting people to really think about why, exactly what you're saying. Why do we need that kind of guidance? We need guidance because we're toddlers.
Yeah.
It's just like when Fetzer got the Greg Jenkins, Fetzer arranged that, and then Stephen Jones recruited Greg Jenkins to write a hit piece on me. Why was that important to them? And then, for 10 years, got people to turn away from the fact that the majority of the buildings turned to dust in midair, because that's something that Judy Wood says. So we gotta, stay away from that. Don't believe that. Don't believe that. Don't look at the evidence. Don't see that. Don't see that. Why do you need to do that? Unless you're trying to cover something up.
Obvious. Yeah. Obviously. Why are victims that are being hit with, let's just call them hidden technologies, why are these people all being called crazy and paranoid schizophrenics, just name calling, but no one looks at the evidence. Like the woman in Pittsburgh with the burns on her shoulder. Like, why don't people look at the evidence? Like, look at the evidence. Why would someone make it, this person? And a lot of times the real TIs, because it's really infiltrated like crazy. So it's almost like vetting people constantly, and I just can't be bothered. But so I just don't even worry too much about it.
There's the biggest thing I can see is for figuring out something for yourself is that you don't need an organization to look at the evidence. And if there's an organization that tells you what to think, it run the other direction.
Right.
Like this, we need to call for a new investigation. Why is the Gages group saying we need to call for a new investigation? All you need is a forensic engineer to look and see what happened.
And
why do you need to
somebody like that, don't we?
Right, and because but to counter that, they had to hire a forensic engineer to counter what I'm saying. They had to hire him. He's being funded as well as his students being funded. And he's a professor at a university, so therefore, it has to be an equal footing to what I am. But
Fetzer? Are you talking about Fetzer?
No, this guy in Alaska, and he was hired, exorbitant amount of money. And the first thing he was to do was to fly to New York City for a photo op from Gage's group, of standing at the memorial site and looking at it. A photo op. How is that a forensic engineer? A forensic engineer is supposed to figure out what happened, but instead this guy was doing finite element programs, trying to calculate some collapse based on what NIST had done or something like that. That's not a forensic engineer. That's somebody's trying to check somebody else's data. The forensic engineer looks at the evidence to figure out what happened, not follow a hypothetical scenario.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's somebody who's bought and paid for.
Again, as Stephen said, you follow the money in that kind of situation. If you see that somebody's thriving and yet they are telling the truth, it doesn't really jive. I mean, that just doesn't seem to be the way that things work in our world. And, and I'm thinking about the way that you've, right up to date, people are trying to bring you into the whole California fires discussion and, how now you're a shill and now you're going against everything.
Because I don't agree with their opinion.
Because you don't agree. So somebody comes up with an opinion. They say it was probably dew weapons, which I was looking into myself at first. And then I started looking at things from
I haven't ruled it out, but you need to investigate the whole thing. You have to look at, and the things that they've looked at are just ridiculous. It's kind of like there's a white car parked in front of the building. Last time I saw a white car parked in front of the building, somebody assassinated somebody in that building. So therefore, that car means somebody's going to be assassinated in the building.
Good.
It's drawing these parallels that doesn't prove that it didn't happen or isn't going to happen, but it's just like you have some substantial evidence, not just a hunch based on one little tiny corner of one little picture and block out the rest of the picture.
So just my question about that is, why are people so invested in having this contrary theory? I mean, the thing, and I do mean theory when I say this, why, when we think about the California fires or anything else, we, and there may be something to it because I'm drawn into it like everyone else. But why?
Well, if you look at any fires are weird. Fires are weird. You're not used to seeing uncontrolled fires. In the Pacific Northwest, you have plenty of rain, and so you're not going to get a brush fire that turned into a huge forest fire. Mm-hmm. And people didn't realize it was as bad as it was until it was too late, and lots of people died in that one, lots more than what died in California.
Right. Can you just tell me, I just lost the first part of that story. Can you just tell me where that was again?
In Australia.
Oh, in Australia, yeah. We were looking at, or I was looking at some of those films the documentaries from 2003 and 2009, I think it was. And I sent them to you because I was really fascinated with what they were talking about in those films.
Can I ask one question of Dr. Judy?
Sure.
I'd be really curious. You may never have got approached for it, and I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying, if we were to just look at the evidence, if you were to look at the evidence, I'm very, and no, no theories or anything, but I'm really curious about Michael Hastings, the journalist whose car exploded on Melrose. And I'm just curious about,
See,
I don't,
I've only heard about hearsay. I've not looked into it myself, but from what I understand, that he had a car that was what do you call it, remotely controlled, and
that's theory. It's
yeah,
the,
and but and so let's move from there to real evidence, which
right,
is cars. Remember the Cash for Clunkers program they did in the U.S.?
yeah, you mentioned this the last time we were on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was to phase out non-controllable cars.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
Think,
was
so
1993. Anything before 1993 was, not able to be controlled.
Kim and I were trying to buy those older cars. But the
so
thing
why would it be a particular year rather than the condition of the car?
Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
wasn't whether or not it was a clunker. It was the particular year
GPS.
it was made.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I think that's the thing is that people are beginning to understand that now because there are a lot of people who are buying up those old cars and actually bringing them over from various places because they want specifically an older but in good condition vehicle, maybe
It's kind
from
of like old
1993.
computers versus new computers.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
or Big Brother can see what you're typing.
Mm-hmm.
the, I find interesting on the Michael Hastings thing though is the engine for the car in those Mercedes that year, that prototype, that everything. Those engines were designed to, in a crash situation, the engine drops and anchors the car. And what's interesting is the engine, and this is where it comes into evidence. And I'm not, I don't know what to make of the evidence, but the engine flew out of the car like 100 yards or 100 meters or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
you'd have to know exactly what happened. Because maybe the thing that's supposed to drop end up letting go early, and then it flung it or something. But you don't. I don't know that information. But what I do know is I know somebody who has a car that was 20 years old, and the car had a problem in its computer system, and it would start up on its own. They came out after work, and the car was out of gas. Turned out been running all day.
Huh,
It just because it turned itself on,
weird.
and they got something else fixed, and it did it in their garage, and they finally decided they just disconnect the battery on it. But that's a 20-year-old car. That's after the Cash for Clunkers
Huh.
deal time. But if you have a car that can turn itself on, as the computer goes haywire in the thing, assuming it wasn't somebody else doing, but somebody else could easily do it. If a
So
Yeah.
car could,
what I like
What?
about what you're saying is because I'm reading The Operators by Michael Hastings, and because I wanted to find out why he would have even been a target in the first place. So I decided to read the book. But as far as the actual accident is concerned, I feel this thing rising up sometimes when you're talking because I go, I figured that this is how it happened and they were trying to get rid of him. It's so hard for us to undo that thinking so that we can just stay engaged with what you're saying
yeah,
and
Yeah.
just
yeah.
hear it out because I'm just telling people in the audience and you guys as well. I feel that. I get what that feeling is. I don't know what it is, but we feel defensive of our conspiracy theory.
Right, right. And people love to run with that because they don't want to admit they're wrong, maybe. I don't know. But see, I don't study that. I haven't studied a lot of things, and you can only know what you know.
Why I think
And
Hastings is interesting is he was exposing people and then he was complaining, and this is where I guess personally I got involved. He was complaining about break-ins. He was complaining about people following him. His computers were wiped clean of a new story he was working on. He was phoning close friends and saying that he felt like he was going to be killed. So he exhibited.
that stuff is more of if you can verify that, it's more interest than what happened with this car. What happened with this car, you can't take it apart. I mean, you can't if unless you analyze the car yourself.
Well, that's just it. It's towed and gone. It's something I'm interested in. It's something I have an opinion about. Um, I can't.
I know what you know what's possible, and I think that's more important is to know, what kind of things can be done. Kind of like, my beef about outlawing lead paint.
I
How many people eat walls,
right.
and
No.
and how many, and you still have lead batteries.
Right.
So why the big thing about that? Well, it's that you think about it, and you can't track somebody in a big apartment building that has lead walls.
That's right. Good one.
And where did they start? That's another interesting point that you make. Where did they start doing the elimination of lead paint?
Probably in projects.
Mm-hmm.
But I know when it first came to be because when I was in fourth grade, Bell and Howell had donated this magnetic card reader thing to our classroom, so we could say a word and have it say it back to us and see how somebody pronounced a word or letter, and it had magnetic strip on it. So I know that magnetic recording was known about at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lead paint ban came after that.
I find that so fascinating. I remember you mentioning that a while ago. And so, again, this is kind of showing our age, but there was a time, I mean, right now, everybody sort of goes, oh, lead free gasoline, lead free this, people just know that that's a thing. And there's the younger folks don't even give it a second thought. But we went through that transition. We heard about how they were, there's always these big announcements that you got to get rid of the baby crib because it's
Or
got lead paint in it, and the rest of it.
or get rid of what do you call it, the saccharin, and instead do NutraSweet.
Yeah, because
NutraSweet is much worse. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. And it's a
aspartame.
neurotoxin. Yeah, it's a neurotoxin. It's much worse. But they basically took saccharin off the market overnight and gave it a bad name that it causes cancer. Well, you give injections into rats of 2,000 times its body weight every day of this stuff. Of course, it's going to kill it.
And it's
And
done so
understand, but
quickly. That's the thing
yep.
that's really interesting. You've got all these other tests that take years and years and years and years. Like if there's just Joe Blow down the street that wants to get
Yep.
something approved by the FDA, but then you've got these other things that's like, oh yeah, we're going to change the whole protocol and the labeling right now.
Or the eggs. Eggs suddenly got a bad rap. You got to buy fake eggs because real eggs give you cholesterol. And
Well,
now they've acknowledged that that's not the case. And then, red wine is good, red wine's bad. That causes cancer, keeps you from getting cancer. It's how whatever lobbyists are paying the most that year.
I don't care. I'm going to drink it anyway.
hey, listen, I got going. I'm going to do this. This is a book I'm reading, No Ordinary Stalking. It's written by someone I've gotten to know. She lives on Quadra Island, or right near. She lives in one of the islands. It's a
Very
look at
close to me.
It's a look at organized stalking and electronic harassment. And it's such a thorough, big book. Wow, it's quite a read, but it talks a lot about hidden technologies and what certain people are going through in terms of being hit.
I actually had I was a victim of that for some time, until I started talking about it on the radio, and then it stopped.
Good.
Like a clock that takes two hands to set the alarm. It was going off at 2 a.m.
Hmm.
Ah,
and things like that. It was like, and then once I mentioned on the radio, I don't know if it was coast to coast. It was something like that. It stopped.
wow, that's unusual.
And gas increasing in my gas tank.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's familiar to me. These kind of weird things. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
had
it's
I
weird
have
stuff like that.
my closet. I have a beautiful new jacket that someone broke in and left here, but there's no sign of entry, and apparently that's very easy. But I wear it out.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, oh great, they left me a brand new jacket.
Thank you very much.
That
So,
really spooked me. Wow, it really worked.
And I had my car electronically disabled, and
speaking of my goodness,
interest. But yeah, it was. I mean, I'm talking about disabled as in frying all the electrical circuitry.
Yeah, I've had it happen.
Uh, Yeah, it's just weird stuff like that. It's no you can't prove it, but it's coincidence and when it happened. Like when my power would go out, that was actually uploading. I think something to do with the federal case, the key temp case. I was uploading the stuff to actually no, it was about the comments for Building 7, and
Aha,
I was uploading my file for it, and then the power went out.
perfect. Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
you know, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I think that people sort of see you as coming down on one side or the other. Is she what she's saying? But it's not. That's what has to be unconditioned. Is that you're not coming down on one side or another. You're just saying, okay, this I can actually empirically say happened to me because I saw it and I saw it with my own eyes. And Stephen is saying that as well. And yet there's other things that you have to stand
it was
back.
just my house. There was no other house in the neighborhood. It was just my house.
Right.
Right.
I
And
get.
so if you said that out of the context of 9/11 or any of the other stuff you've investigated, people might say, "Oh yeah, that Dr. Judy, she's nuts." But then there's the other aspect,
The
which is,
timing was just too weird.
well, yeah,
Hey,
and you know what I'm saying. I think Stephen understands what I'm saying too.
Yep.
In my own special way, I'm trying to
But I
say that.
chose to focus on the evidence, not on this other stuff of, yeah, I had a student murdered. Uh, that doesn't prove what I'm saying is true or false. It's just part of the harassment that part of intimidation or whatever you want to call it.
That's
But
big harassment.
yeah, it's that has nothing to do with the evidence, and so I don't want to put it on the radar screen. It's just like that's just a lot of stuff like that I've had to deal with.
Hmm.
And it's and as well as I sacrificed my career to do this.
absolutely. I gotta go. Kim just walked
Yeah,
in. Speaking of kind of sort of
sure.
weird stuff, our roof just caved in the spare bedroom.
Oh
Oh,
my
Lit-
fun.
goodness. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, well, that you have my permission to leave. That's for sure. I
Yeah.
hope you stay safe.
You
That's
believe?
Let me know what happens.
Yeah, I will. Sorry, I
Okay.
gotta
See
run.
ya. Yeah,
Breaking
you
news.
have stuff to do.
Breaking news. Stephen Shellen's house is falling in.
Doesn't mean anything. It could be an accident, though. We have to look at the
Yep.
evidence.
I
Right.
just. Oh, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. Okay, we'll talk to you later, Stephen. Give Kim a hug for me. Okay. Gosh, that was exciting. I hope he's okay. So the roof's caved in. That's bizarre.
Yep. Yeah. It's it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen, and I don't think
I
that.
had a tree fall on my house twice in the place I was living too, but that was probably coincidence. But what was interesting is on the way down, the tree split in half. Half it went in the backyard, half it went up the side, and none of it touched the house. And it went up the side, went between the car and the house. It didn't damage anything.
Bizarre.
Another one snapped off at roof line and then laid down on the roof. No damage then either. But both times, my cats insisted I go outside. They were just dire need for me to go out of the house. So I went out of the house and I here's kapop kapop and down it comes.
Wow.
But they knew it ahead of time. They
That's
sensed something going on.
Animals are so amazing. I have a dog that's she's from a rescue, and she was clearly not treated particularly well. And she's a Siberian Husky. She was in California, so the weather just wasn't very conducive for her.
Hmm.
But I've had her for a year, and she's
What
very.
color?
She looks like a
What color?
wolf.
White one?
She's gray. She's
Oh,
gray and black. And when I first got her, she didn't have a lot of fur because I guess she was scared. She was, a lot of her fur was missing
pulling it
anyway.
off.
And now it was on the back of her neck, so I don't know exactly what was happening. But instead of having a collar, I have a halter, because if she has that on, she's like a horse, she just goes, okay, somebody else is in charge. But if I take it off, she turns into this wild